people used to have 3 cars. Now you can have 1 car that you drive to work every day, and you can track it on the weekends.
Yeah.
It's a 700 horsepower car that you can daily drive is an incredible thing.
Well, there's people daily driving 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, power grows on trees these days.
All right, welcome back to Making Speed. No Alexander, Charles Cruz, and today we have Rich Waitas of Magnaflow. He is a senior manager there, and as I just asked him before we started, doer of all things. Do you do everything there?
I try not to, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
We feel like you might be one of those people that does everything well, so they just throw you on stuff. You're like, well, hold on, maybe Rich
He's
can
an overachiever for sure.
They're like, oh, maybe Rich can. Wait, hold on, who's gonna? Oh yeah, we'll just have Rich do it.
It's not a bad place to be. I get to learn from a lot of different people, but that's the fun of the job, right?
That's absolutely right. So, are you an engineer by trade, or?
I went to school for that, and then when I realized I didn't want to sit in a cubicle and be one of the guys that just sat there and did numbers all day long, and I wanted to go out and interact with the people of our industry, I kind of had to make a left turn there and got involved in the marketing world. So,
I think that's the kind of beginning of a lot of people's career in the automotive industry. Like, well, I felt like I had to do this, but in reality, I really liked cars, so here I am. So I took what I was doing and changed a whole lot up. So
were you always in automotive then, or did you start off in some other part of the industry or another industry?
Automotive was my thing. I mean, I'm 3rd generation mechanic. My grandfather, father, they were swapping motors, and I was there handing wrenches and getting yelled at for not putting the flashlight in the right spot. That kind of just runs in the blood. And then my father was also into aerospace engineering, and kind of grew up with a pretty comfortable life. A few things here and there. Some of the economic drops in the aerospace industry caused some changes, but for the most part, I lived pretty good. And what I originally thought when I went to school of going into cinematography and getting involved with the film industry, just watched the guys in their senior projects living out of their cars and with their parents in their 30s. And I'm like, I don't know if that's really for me. Yeah. And my dad was quite the nerd, but he lived a pretty good life. And off I went to figure out how to be an engineer.
There you go. Do you go to school in California?
I did, Cal State Fullerton.
Okay, and I assume you grew up in California?
Yeah, pretty much as local as you can get. My grandfather had a farm up in Oregon, and we got sent up there as kids all the time during the summers, and kind of had that bit of lifestyle there where you kind of had to work with your hands. So woodworking was kind of where I got started, and God forbid, that was the one thing as an engineer I said I could design stuff, but I want to go melt metal and make stuff, and that was really what got me here to Magnaflow.
It's pretty cool.
So a lot of people know you from TV shows, but some of them can't. They're like, we know what you're the guy. You're the guy.
He's been on almost every one of them.
So how many shows? We know you from somebody outside. Hey, put your shirt back on. It's weird. We have a window right behind where Rich's head is being projected. And people come by and do strange. Yeah. So how many shows have you been on? How many episodes have you?
Oh my God, I can't even count. I know, probably the one that most people see, to be honest, with Overhauling and Chip, and that's been running since 2004. I mean, and I don't know how many different countries have syndicated it. So it's always a hilarious thing when I get a friend from Germany who says, "Hey, I didn't know you speak German," and I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Well, check this out." They send me a clip, and they got a voiceover of me in German, and running in the EU over there. It's pretty interesting.
We've had a little bit of that too.
Yeah, we got people usually take a picture of the television screen and send it to us, or sometimes it's a video. So hey, look,
you always notice that they always take a picture of mid-word, half eye closed,
when you're
mouth
like this.
Look ridiculous. Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to take good candid shots. Yeah, so you've done hundreds of shows. Do you think 100? A lot?
Yeah, I mean just alone in Overhauling, I've been on over 100 filmings for just that series alone. And then pretty much as the Speed channel kind of converted into what was Velocity, and then, the TV genre spread from, the do-it-yourselfers on the weekend. A big chunk of what I did also was working with the guys at RTM over at Power Nation and Power Block TV, and did a lot of DIY stuff there. So to me, I was a kid in a candy store. I was watching TV, and now I got to be a part of the shows that I watched and participate with all the different people and really the icons of the industry. So for me, it was hardly work. Don't ever tell my boss that.
Yes.
But it's it's definitely something that I've always found as a huge perk, is that I'm doing stuff that I really enjoy doing.
I mean, one of the great things about this industry is, I think, hanging out, as we recently saw when we were in Saudi Arabia with you. Just hanging out with other people in the industry is probably like at least the most satisfying thing for me, because, you know, you kind of see people in passing. Maybe somebody sends you an email, calls you on the phone. But when you put everybody together at once, it's kind of like the best thing ever, I think. So
it is, and we're all trying to do the same thing, really, which is build cool stuff, you know, and we all have the same struggles, too. So when you get together and get to talk to people, you start to feel a little better sometimes about what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. You know?
That's probably the best part of, I mean, even like this show is you get to share about what the real experiences are. And, you know, it's kind of cool. You know, we got a chance to do the really polished stuff that is production TV, as much as, you know, it may or may not be truly polished. It's definitely a different viewpoint on the realities. But, you know, when you get to connect with guys like you in the shop and talk to you guys on a daily basis and go over the real obstacles, I think it brings a whole new light to what it is you really do. This is not something where it's just like, wham, bam, we're done. You know, there's a lot of trial and error. Yeah. There's a lot of fix-its and, oh my God, we made a mistake and we got to redo it, that you don't get to see.
I don't think so either. And it's, you know, if you don't get out and you don't talk to people in the industry, I feel like you almost kind of, you think you're the only one that has those problems, right? So it's a crazy thing, because you're like, oh man, we are on an island all by ourselves, and we are, you know, up Schitt's Creek for sure. On the island, it's not a great place, right? When it comes down to it,
though, we're all kind of using a lot of the same products, you know, which we are fortunate. We have a lot of good products that we work with, but we're trying to put those into all kinds of different applications. So no job is the same. Everything we're up against is different. And so when you think about that and what we have to build the customers for, you know, it makes things very complicated, you know, for time frame, budgets, engineering. You know, there's a lot that goes into one of our builds, or any of the guys in our industry.
Well, I think that's the cool part about what it is actually that you guys do is, you know, at the end of the day, my job is making products that go in a fixture and doing it thousands of times over. But it's really the innovation that you get to find where you're like, wow, okay, well, this is an application. We're going to use a product that was never intentionally designed to go here. We're going to make it fit, and we're going to figure it out, and along the way, hopefully make it look really cool too. And that's something that we, I think, on the other side of the manufacturers of products and really the consumer products, get an advantage of, is that we get to see the creativity that pops out of your guys' heads, whether it's intentional or not. You know, some of the stuff is just we run into a wall and we figure it out, but that's the fun.
Yeah. You've done some pretty creative exhaust work, I've seen, like on Chip's 32 Ford. What was that called? What tell everybody what you did with that, the 32
Well, that was an interesting kind of exercise. And that's one of the great parts about when we get to do stuff with the TV people that aren't necessarily in, quote unquote, the TV atmosphere. That 5-window coupe that he put together was for himself. And really that project that he wanted to do was, how would I create a car that was built originally in the 30s, and if it was hot rodded in the 40s, what would be the era specific products that people would use? So the supercharger, you know, obviously all the mods and modifications that he did were all in line with that 1940s kind of hot rodding era. And he was like, well, you know, exhaust technology has always been there. I mean, you go back to the early Ford GT and you go back to even further, and you see that, you know, the way they designed headers to optimize for power and scavenging, they had some very crude principles, but they were all based in really the science that we have today that's a little bit more finite. And with Chip's car, you know, we wanted to take a flathead, which only has, you know, 3 ports for the 4 cylinders on each side. Right. And that's already sharing the common center port. So you have an extreme hot spot there that you have to manage, and a lot of flow impingement that happens. But at the end of the day, we wanted to kind of give it that 180 header sound, because the flatheads have a very unique sound, and Chip, with the blower and the exhaust, wanted to create something that was uniquely different. And that was really the goal, was how do we get that kind of more tuned sound rather than the plop, 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 plop noise that you get out of a typical true dual.
You still there? Hold on.
Yeah.
We're good. Sorry.
There was a weird delay there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, very cool sound, and it sounded, you know, incredible. Just so how did you build that exhaust?
So what we did was we wanted to preserve kind of like that I guess you call it the ram horn kind of look, where the
Right.
exhaust kind of comes together with the short, tight collector to the body, but not necessarily expose the technological pieces. But in a piece even I posted up on social when we were doing it, Chip, when you ask him to do something, he has that engineering mind as a designer. So when we're building this, he's looking at trying to maintain equal length. And we've all seen it. How many parts have you bought in the world of headers that are equal length plus or minus, right?
Right.
A couple inches here, a couple inches there. It's close enough. We'll call it equal length. Well, Chip got it down to about a 16th of an inch on every rudder. And that includes the crossover that went from the opposite pairings on the even and odd side cylinders to make it. So they had this crazy kind of turnaround where the headers came to to where the collector would be, and then actually moved forward in the car 90, 90, 90 to make up for that crossover length, and then came back so that you had a true equal length header that was a 180 design on a flathead, which, to be honest, I don't think was ever made.
Right.
Yeah. That's really cool. I know it was really unique when I was taking a look at it. The whole car was really understated, which was awesome.
Yeah.
I like the whole look. So it's a nice build.
That's the big thing with Chip. He loves going for that kind of you can't quite tell what's been done, but something's different.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you're building something for yourself, it's a different deal too, because you don't have then you can start doing stuff like that, and it kind of whatever time it takes, and you can get creative, and there's nobody to answer to on the other end. So
we're not under an 8-hour exhaust limit with TV that's saying you got to be done and get your on the fly shot and be out the door on the next product. I think we spent a whopping 4 days on just design and laying it out before we actually started putting parts out.
Sounds about right.
That sounds. That's how it goes. Do you have any other favorites from some of the shows you did?
I mean, the great part about the shows, cars were as I kind of went through the process, became the binding agent, so to say.
Sure.
But really, it's the personalities. Car people are the fascinating component out there, because cars don't make themselves, and they don't become these other creatures that they become without the personality of the owner and the creator, really. Because these days, it's not just guys working in their garages. People are seeking out builders like yourself to make their concept come to reality and give it your own flavor. And that's something that, to me has been the most extreme part of the builds have been the time constraints, but really the most enjoyable part that makes all the time go away is always just the people you get to interact with.
Yeah.
It always does come back to the people. I think that's kind of how we started this whole thing off. It's all about, it's about the people.
Is.
And sometimes you forget that because there's a lot of stress involved and timelines, but in the end, when you look back, even if it's out of the moment, you can always say, like, you know what, that kind of sucked, but we had a really good time. Remember when this happened? Remember that happened? So that's kind of
like in our shop. There's roughly 15 people out there working, and at the end of the day, each car is a little bit of every person in the shop. So it's pretty remarkable. When the car is done and the customer can come in and look at it, and each guy could come up and say, "Well, I did this," or "I thought of this," and I mean, it's amazing when you really put it that way.
Yeah, one of the toughest. We want everybody to kind of do their own thing, and then we're up against like, well, here's what the customer wants. So hold on, let's keep molding it. So we're kind of looking at the moment for another project we can do, like the Tiffany truck we built, because that was that was just a fun thing to do, and call it a good team building experience, because there was no customer on the other end, and we did whatever we wanted, and we just kind of let it rip. So we haven't done something like that in a while, but it would be good to get back to that again.
And sometimes it's like a freestyle project like that, where it's not super
plan.
well thought out. Right. You don't have a rendering. You just kind of like in your head, you just got an idea and you just roll with it. And that,
no limits.
Yeah, exactly. Some of those are the best projects.
I think so.
I mean, if nothing states how far-reaching that was, I mean, that was probably one of the more interesting things in that trip we went on to Saudi with the Global Auto Salon, is how many fans were picking out that truck when they saw it on TV and followed it through its life cycle. I mean, this is across the world, literally on the other side.
Right.
And it was pretty wild.
Yeah. Everybody knows it from a different place because they saw it on TV. They remember it before that. So we have people that are like, oh, I remember we saw that. I think you guys brought that out at the NSRA show. And then, we saw that at SEMA. Some people remember from being in a video game. It was in,
or a magazine.
A magazine.
I mean,
so
or
that's
just
kind of
on
cool.
social media too. Yeah.
And it had accidental reach. We didn't, we built it actually for fun, and then it ended up being, fairly marketable. So that was good. So Charles and I don't know if you know this, but we call you Mr. Hobby.
Yeah. That's your nickname.
That's my non sequitur into your nickname. So we call you Mr. Hobby because we're like, well, Rich probably has that as a hobby at one time.
And the hobbies you have, you know everything about that hobby. I don't even know how you can fit all that in your brain, but it's pretty impressive.
Oh, I don't know what it is, but they all are relatively the same when it comes back down to it. I understand why I became an engineer now, because it's just the compelling fact that I want to know about it, how it works, why it works, and then the fact that I disassemble it and reassemble it and hopefully reassemble it correctly is just it's been my childhood thing. I don't know how many pieces of electronics and VCRs I destroyed trying to figure out how they worked when I was a kid, but my parents tolerated me enough, and here I am.
Back when VCRs were way too expensive to destroy, you were destroying VCRs.
Oh, yeah.
Betas.
Yeah, you should have gone after the betas. That's what.
Right.
So hobbies include, and I have written down over 10 hobbies. No, just you love you love
cars,
RC
right?
stuff. I love RC stuff as well, but.
Motors fast. I don't care if they're electric or gas. I played with nitro electric cars. And really, it's the same thing that compels me in the full-size market. It's just I can finish hundreds of these projects for a fraction of the cost.
Right.
And when you're done with them, you throw them in your backpack and you walk away.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and most of them are, the engineering behind them is great because most of them are just miniaturized versions of full-size stuff, which has always been cool, so...
without dorking out too much, but the world that we live in today with CNC, 3D printing, and rapid prototyping that goes on, people can take what is the real product and emulate those things so closely in these miniaturizations. And the fact that, the Jeep market, and we've all seen what goes on there with, bumpers, body armor, different axles, and all the aesthetics that, turn them into overland vehicles. And the fact that you can buy literally replicas of all of that,
everything. And
they still drive and climb like the real thing.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty incredible. So it's come a long way since we were kids.
Yeah,
and they maintained as with so many. Charles and I was talking about this, but now the pricing almost hasn't changed on RC vehicles, right? Like when I was a kid in the '80s, that stuff was so expensive.
Well, like a Clodbuster or a Blackfoot or any of those trucks, they were $250, $300 back then.
Yeah.
As a kit, they weren't assembled. Now you can buy really nice, high quality assembled RC cars for just a little bit more money, and they're just ready to go. Or you can buy them unassembled still, I think. But the pricing hasn't changed that much. But the technology has changed a lot.
So
Well, it just depends. Like I said, I don't know how many cars start off as $300 projects, and then you start throwing the aftermarket at it. And I got bumpers and headlights and winches, and $1,000 into
just like
a toy.
A real car.
Just like a real car.
Yeah, exactly. No different.
You
No
can
different.
go way upside down. Yeah, it is easy to take it from the $300 or $400 car to over $1,000 really quick. But yeah, that was that's one of those things that when I was a kid, my parents didn't really get the whole hobby stuff. So I would end up this is the one I want, and I end up with the lesser one. So now as an adult, I go back and rebuy all that stuff for myself.
It's so funny because it's what do we do with the cars we grew up with? That's the same thing. It's like I grew up with that 1972 Nova that was a $500 junkyard rebuild, and guess what car I want to rebuild?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Except for it costs $50,000 now.
Right.
I just got my son a BMX bike. I don't even know if he wants a BMX bike, but I got him a BMX bike for Christmas that pretty similar to the one I would have wanted when I was a kid. So I'm like, he better. I'm really excited to get
it. It's a little used now. I've always been riding it around.
I've been riding around the shop. It's a little on the small side for me. I think it's an 18-inch top tube. A little bit on the small side for me, but so many of the things we do. I think that's a lot of the driving force behind the entire automotive aftermarket as well. It's stuff that It's like, well, I didn't do it then, so I'm going to do it now, or I did it then like this, but now I'm going to do it 10 times.
Now
better.
I know better.
Now I know better. Right.
We're still kids at heart.
Yeah. So, very interesting. So, at Magnaflow, we know Magnaflow from the aftermarket exhaust, but what else do they do? We've talked about this a little bit.
What's the parent company? There's a parent company, right?
So we've obviously gone under a couple of new names and things over the years, and really Magnaflow is an extension of our parent company, which was called Car Sound, and we were founded as a aftermarket distribution for just exhaust. We weren't even in the manufacturing business for the first year. And then when, the owner, Jerry Pallone, decided that, this is something that we can do, we shouldn't be buying the product, that we just need to invest into the machinery to make the product. We got into the first stages of that, which was remanufactured catalytic converters. And we were buying converters that were taken off of cars, which you can't do anymore and legally use them anymore. But we were, back then, that was the process. You would basically procure a used converter, you would recondition the converter and resell it at a lower price. And as he got more involved within the production process, and really it's a family-owned company then, and started off as just, father, son, cousins, and daughters, grew into where we are today, where, we're looking at how we can build the products and how to become very vertical in delivering everything that we can for the particular segment. So catalytic converters currently is where the majority of our business is, but it's also where we were founded. And then the performance exhaust industry popped right in when we said, hey, well, we're bending tubing, we're forming cat bodies, we can do the same parts. It's literally connected to the same piece.
Right.
Why not push to the tailpipe? And we got involved with, obviously, Magnaflow. It became the extension of car sound catalytic converters. And today is really the umbrella. So we do converters under Magnaflow. We do performance exhaust under Magnaflow. And for a short span there, we were doing things like the header business and shorty business as we saw the EPA was allowing.
Right. And one of the more interesting things I think you've told me, this is going back probably a year, but you guys can, if you have a new vehicle at Magnaflow, you can engineer an exhaust system for it in about how long?
Oh, so we've actually done that test as far as rapid prototyping and delivery to market. And if you want to look at what our potential at full throttle is, we go at about 72 consecutive work hours. So take that into 8-hour days. And that was what our project was, is how do we take it? And believe it or not, it was funny. It's one of the cars you guys featured on your show was one of our first target vehicles. And this is back in 2006, I believe. We did the time study, and that was on an SSR.
Right.
Okay.
And that car was a limited production vehicle. We wanted to see if we could make something that was something that could be delivered quickly to market so we can satisfy that customer that was buying it. And we brought the vehicle in, and we went through our standard development process, and we prototyped, tested, validated first article, and went through our first stages of early automation. We've changed quite a bit since then with our robotics and the way we do our capture. But we were able to come to market with our first 15 products delivered on a shelf within 72 consecutive work hours. So
this is
pretty
crazy.
wild.
Amazing.
I mean, that's, yeah. So what, and now what's your process? So bring in, say, the new Mustang, or the new Jeep Gladiator. There you go. Yeah. What do you guys do first?
The new process, I mean, think about what we're doing right now is really what we're trying to harness is all of the technology to put information that's available digitally up front. So I don't even have to get a car. I work with OE data that's transmitted, and we use partners such as SEMA or some of our own acquisition if the vehicle's available. We'll get the vehicles in as a pre-production vehicle or a mule. And we'll do a full blue light scan, and that's a 3D scan on the vehicle where we put it up on a lift, and much like you've seen and probably more familiar to a lot of the audience, it's like a Faro arm where they touch points and they can create a model. We're actually doing that with a 3D capture scanner, and then bring the car back when we're ready to actually do final sound and validation power testing. So it's changed a lot because we can do a lot of this work up front. So when the car actually hits the door, we have near finished goods ready to test.
And then how accurate are those goods when you mount it up on a vehicle that may have not been there before? Once you have your prototype version to mount on there, is it pretty darn close?
I was the biggest skeptic. So I grew up in this company building parts on a car and building some of the most constraining fixtures because we were getting into early automation. And that meant if you had a part that had a slight cut variation of a 16th of an inch and you went to go put it in a robot to do a weld, that 16th of an inch gap might be a burn through because that robot doesn't know how to compensate for that a human might be able to. So we had to make our parts that much more constrained. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to get that kind of tolerance. And yet, as we started to develop this program, I mean, the stuff we got fit like near OE. I mean, it's pretty wild when you could take a hanger out on 5 pieces of pipe that have been cut separately, welded separately in a 3D printed fixture because we've never had the car there, and then hook it all up like for the first time and watch it fit like the part that you just took off. So it was pretty eye-opening for me, even as a skeptic of the technology.
Plus, you can have this stuff pretty much ready to go before... As soon as the vehicle's released, but not necessarily like on the market yet, you can have the parts designed and ready to go on the vehicle as soon as it's released, rather than, having to wait for,
Our time to market is really what is a huge advantage. And that's something, if you look, like when a brand new vehicle comes to market, and there's not a technological disadvantage to it. If we're talking about a traditional vehicle that doesn't have sensors and other parts that we have to do extensive testing on today, I will qualify that with a lot of like the diesel markets and such, where you've got a DPF, a diesel oxidation cat, you have selected catalyst reduction, all these sprayers and nozzles. You still have to have actual empirical data and testing that we have to do on the dyno to verify that our stuff doesn't move those out of parameter, which we can't do with emulated software where we're just looking at physical fitment. But when it comes to a vehicle that just needs an exhaust pulled out and another one built to put back in its place, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It just comes out and goes back on.
Any other new technology in gas vehicles that makes your job there difficult?
Well, our biggest thing, and you've probably seen some of our newer releases, we've obviously included some of them in our latest XMod series products. We are working with multi-valve systems. And like a lot of the GM cars introduced, and even going back to the very first inception of some of the LX platform cars that had the MDS systems where they're dropping 4 cylinders,
right.
They had to have pressure wave controllers, and they were really just these little valves inside the system that created back pressure when you had half as much air pumping,
right?
So that you don't get drone or unwanted vibration. Nowadays, it's being mitigated, like, for example, on a C7 platform, or even now the new C8 that we're currently working with. You've got valves that are operating for optimal back pressure during low speed operation. And also, mainly, really, it has to do with noise, harmonic, and vibration stuff. That's how you make the car comfortable for the person who doesn't care that the exhaust makes a note. How do you make that power pass through without having an impact on the way that the car physically feels or sounds?
Interesting.
And that's funny because, like, if you go back 20, 30 years, people didn't understand exhaust like they do now. Everybody.
It was an afterthought.
Yeah, everybody goes, "Oh, let's put 3-inch exhaust on everything because it looks cool." But then, like some of the conversations we've had with you, especially with like doing the LT4, was like, what size do we do? Because like that's right in the middle, right from the factory. It's like 2 3/4, I think, on the LT4. So there's a lot of science that goes into all this now, and it can make a big difference on power. So
power is the one thing that, if nothing else, there's still a lot of math that you can do to get and hit that target. The tough part becomes packaging, and that's really today's cars. They're where the exhaust sits, how much heat it can emanate. These kinds of things are the things that we're still looking at, and we call them MES, manufacturer engineering standards. So when you're next to a plastic gas tank, which for the most part wasn't in use until the last decade, you can only be so close to that, and as we found out in some of the early, it was a mule car for the 2005 Mustang, and it had the very first kind of like saddlebag plastic tank, and the exhaust runs right underneath them. And this goes into kind of talking about some of the drawbacks too with working with some of the data we got from OE. They had a problem with the rear crash test where the exhaust system on the prototype car had hangers that were kind of in the traditional fashion where the hangers were perpendicular to where the exhaust path ran, which meant if it got in a car accident, they would swing up and into the gas tank. So you'd have these hot pipes that, on a rear collision would sit there and just melt away at the gas tank and then pour fuel all over the place. So during that development process, we came out with a design. We were ready to go to market, and this is why it was still critical that we have to have an actual production car. We got the production car, and day one, we fit our system, and we're like, oh, what the hell just happened? Our hangers are the wrong way. And come to find out that they discovered this issue with the gas tank swinging up, and now the hangers run parallel to the exhaust, and they made this little shield where if the car was impacted from the rear, it would push the exhaust down away from the gas tank. So it would basically disconnect it from the car, but it wouldn't be pressed into the plastic gas tank. So we discovered that, unfortunately, right after we had built all of our fixturing and are ready to go to market with what we thought was a validated design, but had to go back to square 10, which was just rearranging the hangers because the pipe profile ended up being the same.
And did a lot of that have to do with the fact that you built the exhaust system using plans for the vehicle, and then you got the vehicle in and you realized the change they had made after, basically you're almost using like slightly outdated plans because they made an engineering change?
We basically had a mule car that was a suspension validation vehicle, and it wasn't one that had gone through the final stages of getting to where it was a representative engineering car. So the underpinnings were still quote unquote prototypical. So that was something that we had to overcome, and really that we built into the program to kind of future-proof what we were doing is instead of making the investment all the way through, and today we get around that with rapid prototyping. We use basically, and you guys haven't been out here to see it, but we use kind of a same thing like a chassis table where we have universal mounting points, and we'll have universal fixtures that we can scan. So imagine now, instead of actually hand building a welded fixture or 3D printing it, we can go through and kind of arrange little stop points and never have had the product and have it scanned. So we can actually scan the fixture to see what the hard points are and build the product in a fixture for a product that's never been fitted to a car. And we can have that fixture as a temporary, so we're not making the investment of building out that fixture until we get the final design. So now we'll build that product, go on there, and we'll validate, all of those touch points and go, wow, okay, so hangers are good, sound is good, volume, airflow is fine. And then once all of those things are done, we can go and finalize that fixture. And then at which point in time, when production's ready, we just 3D print the fixture and it just bolts right into place, and we don't have to worry about it being as adjustable. So.
See, nobody knows that nobody knows that much goes into it, right? They're like, it's welding up some exhaust there and shipping it out the door.
And that's why a system from you guys, I think, is a bargain. It really is compared to like
the R&D that we put behind it, for sure.
Because most people, when they think of buying something like that, they think of them. They're like, all right, I'm buying these straight pieces here and these curves, and they're welded together, and it's going to work on my car. But in fact, there's so much more engineering that goes into it.
Well, one of our custom exhaust systems, just using like one of your builder kits, we'll spend 40 hours roughly, 30 to 40 hours building an exhaust system, and that's all TIG welded and nice and everything. But that's a lot of money when you're paying labor versus, if you can buy a kit for a car that's already pre-engineered, you're way ahead. But the cars we're building, a lot of times we don't have that luxury. We have to hand build it to work around all the suspension and, the other upgrades that we're doing. But for OE stuff, I mean, it's a great way to do it, and on a budget too.
Well, I think that's the big thing too, is it's really how do we look at the vehicle as a system, and how does that exhaust actually integrate with that system? Because it's not just the place where exhaust gases leave. It's now a part of crash zones. It's got noise and harmonic vibration mitigation. So the weight of the exhaust system, the durometer of the rubber or urethane inserts that keep the exhaust from vibrating, the harmonic frequencies that it cancels, that the car's chassis also cancels. And this gets into the whole new world that we started using quarter wave resonators. We call it our new no drone technology. And the quarter wave resonators are those kind of dead end pipes, or they call them side branch exhausts, where you have a standard tube and then you have a branch and what looks like a muffler, but it only has one inlet on one side. Right. And they're basically Helmholtz resonators. So they're creating the frequency we want to cancel, and we're tuning every car for those chassis. And that's something that's unique. It's not just about a dampening device such as a muffler, which in most cases, it'll alter the frequency based upon its size and the perforation core and the packing density. But now we're actually tuning that exhaust for that particular motor. It's not just like, okay, well, for example, on the new BMW, if you've got a 3 liter, if you've got the 2 liter variant, the same chassis, the exhaust system changes dramatically on what we're doing with regards to the resonator, because the motors make such different sounds. So those are the things about the R&D by application that are unique that you'll find today that weren't available in the past.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So are you guys doing any type of exhaust valve systems in terms of changing the sound? Like everybody, that's one of our most common questions. Seems like all of our customers have had have a flap in their exhaust, where it's open when on startup, and your neighbors are annoyed, and it's like they want to be able to have like the loudest possible system, and they also want to be able to have the quietest possible system. Yes. And then now they want that, and they want something in between. So they'll be like, and then kind of sort of loud. Maybe if I could have, they start throwing out numbers for different settings. So in the past, obviously, what we typically do is like, well, we have 2 different settings you can have, like what the exhaust system sounds like, and really, really loud dumping out of the headers, essentially. Do you guys do anything like that, or have you been, have you worked on that kind of stuff?
It's a legitimate question being posed by a great number of consumers. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the average vehicle and, all the stuff you guys deal with as far as price range or in the custom car range, you're talking six figures plus. But even in the world that we deal with, where the guy buying a $40,000 Mustang, he wants to be able to sound track ready on one day where, it's all about the noise and the feedback that you get, and then needs to drive it into his apartment complex inside of, under 3 floors of people and not get an eviction notice. And that's the reality that we work with today is that, it used to be people bought 3 or 4 cars and you had your race car and you had your fun car and you had your family car. And as the price of cars have gone up and the longevity of those vehicles have gone up, the utility has changed, and that kind of dual mode car means dual mode exhaust. And OEMs are being more compliant with that. The Mustang has the active exhaust setup, and the crazy part is I just got finished looking at some of the new GT500 stuff, and that car not only has the variable exhaust components with electric valves from factory, and literally it bypasses most of the internals, so it is a straight pipe out the back.
Wow.
But it also has a feedback device that provides noise cancellation through the car's audio system.
Really?
So some of the harmonics that you couldn't, it's 700 plus horsepower car. It's going to create a ton of exhaust vibration and noise, and they actually feed back negative pressure waves based upon cancellation, and we're doing what's called active canceling to get rid of some of those undesirable sounds in the cabin, which is funny. If you ever get a chance to jump in one, kind of listen to the car with the exhaust and then pop your door open or roll the window down, and all of a sudden the exhaust note changes inside. It's because you're literally hearing inside the passenger compartment a canceled version while the car is running. And
so how exactly is that working? So you've got so what are they doing there?
So basically, on like the GT500, the development team came across and said, okay, these are the undesirable frequencies inside the car. So in order to make the power requirements and make the car sound the appropriate way, and I will give Ford credit for this, they've, in the GT350s, 500s of the past, and including this one, have made the character sound of a Mustang an important aspect of its marketing. So they've made a good sounding exhaust. And in a lot of ways, we've all found this the same thing, is a good sounding exhaust tends to introduce some vibration, other harmonics that isn't desirable for the average consumer. And this car has to fit both boats. It needs to do the best of both worlds. It needs to drive around, and it also needs to do 10s in the quarter mile.
Yeah.
And when you do that, they're actually recording the sound and going, okay, this is the undesirable sound, so we're going to use the stereo system to create the inverse of that sine wave of the frequency. Okay. And just like your headphones do on the aircraft, it's giving you noise cancellation inside your cab.
That's wild. I think we live in a world where people need everything and all at once. So, right. I want this, but not too hot, not too cold, not too loud, not too quiet.
But, think about like the horsepower that's in some of these new vehicles, compared to the muscle cars that everybody thought like were so fast. 426 Hemi car, that was a fast car. That wasn't anything compared to what is out there now with all this new technology. You've got air conditioning, good brakes. you've got everything.
Trying cross country.
Yeah, like you said, people used to have 3 cars. Now you can have 1 car that you drive to work every day, and you can track it on the weekends.
Yep.
It's a 700 horsepower car that you can daily drive is an incredible thing.
Well, there's people daily driving 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, power grows on trees these days. We're definitely in the air, and this is the crazy part as an emissions company. I'm sitting here and I've got Bill Goldberg's Demon, and I look at that thing every day, and it's like it's making in excess of 800 horsepower, and it's considered a super ultra low emissions vehicle.
Right.
We talk about muscle cars getting single digit gas mileage and pumping out literally clouds of emissions that are supposed to be choking our environment, and yet here today we're making 4 times the power of some of those cars, and if the gases coming out the back weren't heated, you could probably not suffocate from breathing it. It's that clean.
Right.
So it's a pretty amazing technological feat.
And if your foot's not in it, you probably get pretty good gas mileage as well.
It's not bad. I'm
sure. It creeps into the double digits.
Creeps little by little.
But 800 horsepower carbureted, 426 Hemi, what? 2 miles to the gallon. It's nothing. It's a race car at that point. You don't even really drive.
It's gallons to the mile. You're in a different category.
It flips.
Yeah.
So yeah, we one of the things I don't want to say we struggle with. One of the challenges in our builds is kind of trying to incorporate. People are so spoiled with all this cool technology in modern cars. They want it in their old cars, so we're always like, well, we can do that, but we can't do this, which brought up my question about the valve and the exhaust. Because
and part of that is we don't have the support yet in the aftermarket world, and we don't want to give somebody something that's going to fail, and like I think we had talked about in the past, some of this stuff, it's only good for so many cycles, and then you're going to have mechanical failure. And that we build cars that people drive. That's just it. So the last thing we want to do is send a car, halfway across the country and then get a phone call 6 months later. Hey, this part failed, and how do we fix it? Yeah,
so many of the cool little things, all the ideas people have, and the stuff that this president and their daily drivers, if we would incorporate that stuff, which on some of it we have before, but it would fail, almost. We know, like, well, it's not going to last for long, so we don't want to do that to you.
Well, and the big automotive manufacturers, they spend millions of dollars on each of those little parts that the aftermarket world's trying to reproduce, and that we just don't have. We don't have that kind of budget, to work with.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty interesting direction that we've had to kind of take in from the consumers and provide some feedback on. And I know we had just mentioned before, like the XMod product that we released at SEMA, and those incorporate valves. And we have a new product that I'm going to tell you about. You'll probably see it in January of next year. But with an XMod, we're enabling the person to do some things that we find that the racer wants to do, and that the DIYer with the aid of a single 10 millimeter should be able to do. And at the same time, incorporate some of the electronics that are out there in the aftermarket, and kind of combine some of the resources from other aftermarket exhaust companies. And really, with the new not the new Mustang, but the existing Mustang and the new system offering we have, our XMod product allows you to remove mufflers in different segments, and it's all V-band clamped in. Mm-hmm. So, rather than having someone, and I know you guys have probably dealt with this a number of times, because everybody thinks they know what they want when it comes to sound. Everybody wants loud. Right. It's like, oh yeah, I don't care. And then, you get that phone call back, the buyer's remorse that happens a couple months down the line. We're like, can we quiet it down a hair?
Yeah. Or 10 minutes later,
it sounds great until you have to drive it every day, or drive it on the times you do, and deal with a passenger and a phone call. And those are the kinds of things that I think have become new problems in our world, in the exhaust world. And our new product line gives you the ability to take those parts in and out. So rather than having to buy a race series and then having to sell that and come back and buy a street series, our new XMod parts come with both in the box. So they have muffler deletes everywhere with V-band clamps.
Right.
Yeah. So pop them off, you get a straight pipe when you want it, put the other one back on, just need a 10 millimeter and a quick release. And then with that too, we're also incorporating the ability to have block off plates on cars that have multiple exhaust outlets, so dual or quad exhaust, where you can pop it off, and if you wanted to, incorporate your favorite aftermarket valve. So whether it's a butterfly valve style, a barn door style, you pick what you want, and it integrates with our system. But the big thing that we found, and same thing that you guys have talked about, is you can't find one that's necessarily going to live the life of the vehicle. And we build lifetime warranty exhaust. So we decided to let the consumer pick what they wanted, and our system integrates with almost a dozen different valve systems out of the box with very little fabrication.
Works with is a good good solution for that, because who wants to? Those are fun. People, almost every full build we do, people want something like that, but we all know they get clogged up with carbon pretty quickly, and
Yeah, even with fuel injection, it happens, and with some fuel injection systems, if you don't have it placed right, it'll freak the whole system out, and the car doesn't run right too.
And that's something that I think that, again, working in this industry, the fact that, people think that we're just switching pipe sizes and doing before and after dynos, we do things to understand how the system integrates, and with understanding how the system works with the ECM is one of the big parts that we do. We use an all-wheel drive coupled dyno, and the reason why we do that even on two-wheel drive is that we can emulate real driving. The minute you put a car into a dyno mode, it's not seeing load the same way. It's not driving the front wheels and dealing with all the different things that your yaw control and stability control are working with. And those are things that the real car has to undergo. And some of the things that you run into are emissions related. And like a good example of that is in the Dodge world, the rear O2 sensors do all your long-term fuel trimming. So if you change the diameter of the pipe, or if you put a cutout in front of it and there's an air leak, your long-term fuel trims will go, oh, look at all this extra air, richen up the car, and all of a sudden your car's fuel economy drops, the power drops, it's just putting out black smoke, and you're like, what the hell went on?
Right.
So those are the real world problems that we deal with. The systems are very integrated now. It's not just a pipe and a muffler.
Right. We're past that.
Again, this is why it's a bargain to buy something.
You're not just buying the metal. You're buying all that engineering.
Right.
So
Exactly.
That's so. What are some? We'll call them emerging markets for you guys. What's I know side by sides are huge now, and I know you guys are doing some side by side stuff. I don't know if you want to talk about that or any other new stuff on the horizon that you're kind of tinkering with.
Well, the company in itself, we've built a brand that's based upon, engineering and delivering a product that is truly bolt-on. And we've kind of prided ourselves in kind of focusing in on what we've done with exhaust. And we really do offer everything from engine to tip as far as product offerings. So, I can't say that we have any new direction yet, but we're open to looking at what other opportunities the performance world offers. And we've seen a lot of odd consolidations and acquisitions over the years. Certain companies buying up other companies, and the one thing that we have found as a negative is we see a lot of that innovation that drove all these independents to become big is kind of going away. So we want to still take advantage of the fact that we're still that small enough dynamic company to be innovative and come up with some new ideas. So we've got a new team here of people. The 3 engineers we brought in straight out of school to help us with some new ideas. And
cool.
Apart from just some of the categorical exhaust stuff, such as the UTV market and motorcycle, we want to look beyond just exhaust.
Awesome. So what happens if everything goes electric? People always ask us this.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, I mean, maybe do you guys have
speaker mufflers or something?
Actually, that has been across our table, is how to make non-gasoline internal combustion motors sound like proper motors.
Right.
I think reality of it is, I live in California, where we probably have the largest proliferation of electric only and hybrid cars.
Right.
And even still here as a culture, the consumer that's buying those, there's the guy that appreciates a little bit of acceleration that's in there. But at the end of the day, it's not the track car. It's not the weekend car that they're polishing. No. It is still a commuter that gets around and has some cool features on a really large screen in the middle.
Yes, large. It's got to have a large screen.
It's like, I don't know. I don't see it as being that impactful. I think we've looked at it across the United States and try to see and sit down, because every year we're putting down our 5-year plan and a modification to that and our 10-year plan, and we're looking at just the viability of electric as a go-to. It's a real part of what's going to be in our future. I mean, 10 years down the line, though, I still can't see that the Midwest is going to have a Prius as a primary transportation vehicle, or electric pickup truck, or an electric semi being its primary transportation form. We just don't have the infrastructure for it.
Yeah, and the power's got to come from somewhere. We're
still burning coal to make batteries.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
it's more of just a trendy thing to do in the Midwest, especially. You'll see, you see it, I don't know. What do you think? Maybe?
I think it's very cool stuff.
Cool.
It's interesting, but I don't see it flipping completely over to, it doesn't actually make sense in my head that it would go completely that. And it comes down to, I mean, a lot of the, how are you going to you have to make the power somewhere.
Well, and that's just it is, the thing about electric is it drives a lot of the problems in design that we have with internal combustion and trying to deliver from a motor located remotely from the axles. If you can have motors on the wheels and driving that, whether it's sprung or unsprung weight, those are all minor things to pick up, but it changes the way that the car can be physically designed, and the opportunities, obviously, there's no doubt that all-wheel drive has distinct advantages on the road, especially through inclement weather. But it's very difficult to get that jack shaft in a transfer case in a rear-wheel drive platform to push through all that suspension and get to the front cavity. Yet, you can put in a couple of 100 horsepower motors in the front, and a battery cell in the front area and get yourself an all-wheel drive platform with, electric assist. And to me, that's where I really see the technology going, is to a better meshing of hybrid in the performance industry,
right?
Not so much a replacement of. I just can't see electric as being the derivative, because, I mean, just personal bias. To me, there's a heartbeat and a soul to a car that comes from internal combustion that you just can't get from an electric.
It does not. It doesn't happen. I every once in a while I kind of check back in on Formula E just to watch them go around. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And then I asked myself, well, how many generations of people does it take to forget about how cool that sounded and how much fun that was, to just be like,
we don't care. Yeah.
There's no emissions.
I still think it's a long way away.
I hope it's a long way away, because we have way too much fun doing this. So, so in closing up here, where can people go to learn more about Magnaflow exhaust? You want to throw some of that stuff out there, because I know I go to your website every once in a while, and I get customers that are like, hey, what does it sound like? And you know what? There's actual sound clips on there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. It's, I mean, we try to make it pretty easy. It doesn't matter which social platform you're on. You can always find us either at @Magnaflow or a #Magnaflow to do any kind of searches on products that we're putting out there or stuff that consumers have out there. But we have a YouTube channel. We're at www.magnaflow.com. And obviously, in our website, you can find everything we have product-wise. Search by application, search by universal, see some of the video content, and obviously YouTube's a great repository there. And we obviously have a lot of good content with you guys too, and everybody else that's putting out, content out there that we try to share. So if it's Magnaflow, it's pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Well, as always, thank you for all your support, and thanks for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you.
Again, Making Speed, Noah Alexander, Charles Cruz, and Richard Waitas from Magnaflow. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
See you.